November 2nd, 1944, a muddy field somewhere in France. General George S. Patton, Jr., old blood and guts himself, stands before 676 black soldiers of the 761st Tank Battalion. These men have trained for 2 years. They've been deemed ready for combat for months, but they've been deliberately kept stateside while white units with less training shipped out to Europe. Now, finally, they're here, and Patton has something to say. Men, you're the first Negro tankers to ever fight in the American Army. I would never have asked for you if you weren't good. I have nothing but the best in my army. I don't care what color you are as long as you go up there and kill those Kraut sons of bitches. Everyone has their eyes on you and is expecting great things from you. Most of all, your race is looking forward to your success. Don't let them down, and damn you, don't let me down. The speech is classic Patton, profane, direct, brutally honest about the racial stakes. He doesn't pretend racism doesn't exist. He acknowledges it, then tells them to prove everyone wrong through violence against the enemy. What Patton doesn't mention is this. He specifically requested this battalion, against the advice of his own staff, against the objections of commanders who insisted black soldiers couldn't handle armor warfare. Patton looked at the desperate situation in France, the stalled advance, the fortified German positions, the coming winter, and he asked for the 761st by name. Over the next 183 days, the Black Panthers of the 761st Tank Battalion will fight without relief. They will break through German lines that white units couldn't penetrate. They will liberate concentration camps. They will lose 71 men killed in action and hundreds more wounded. They will earn hundreds of individual decorations, and for nearly 50 years they will be forgotten. This is the story of the Tank Battalion that changed armor warfare, challenged American racism, and waited half a century for recognition they earned in blood. This is the story of the Black Panthers. Let me take you back to understand what made the 761st so unlikely. In 1941, the United States Army had exactly 0 black tank crews, 0 black armor officers, 0 black soldiers in mechanized units of any kind. This wasn't an accident. This was policy. Army doctrine, written and endorsed by senior commanders, explicitly stated that black soldiers lacked the mechanical aptitude for modern warfare. Tanks required technical knowledge, quick decision-making, and coordinated action. The Army's official position was that black men simply couldn't handle it. But there was pressure building. A. Philip Randolph, the civil rights leader, had threatened a massive march on Washington in 1941 to protest discrimination in defense industries and the military. President Roosevelt, desperate to avoid the political crisis, issued Executive Order 8802, banning discrimination in defense jobs. The military was forced to make at least symbolic gestures toward integration, and so, in March 1942, the Army reluctantly activated the 761st Tank Battalion at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. The Army's plan was transparent: create a black tank battalion, train them slowly, keep them in the United States, and use their existence as evidence of progress, while never actually deploying them to combat. What the Army didn't count on was the men who volunteered. Take Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers, born in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, son of a sharecropper. He'd worked as a mechanic before the war, could take apart an engine blindfolded, could drive anything with wheels or tracks. When the 761st activated, Rivers was one of the first to volunteer. He wanted to prove something, not just to white America, but to himself. Or consider Lieutenant Jack Robinson. Yes, that Jack Robinson, the future baseball legend who would break the color barrier in major league sports. In 1942, he was a second lieutenant in the 761 ST, serving as a platoon leader. Robinson was eventually court-martialed for refusing to move to the back of a military bus in Texas. He was acquitted, but the incident shows the environment these men operated in. Even as they trained to fight fascism abroad, they faced Jim Crow at home. The 761st trained at Camp Hood, Texas, a brutal environment in every sense. The Texas heat was crushing, the terrain was unforgiving, and the racism was constant. Black tank crews couldn't eat in the same mess halls as white soldiers. They couldn't use the same recreation facilities. When they went into nearby towns, they faced segregated buses, whites-only restaurants, and the very real threat of violence. One member of the 761st E.G. McConnell, later recalled, "We were training to fight Hitler's racism with an army that practiced its own version. The irony wasn't lost on us. But here's what the army brass didn't expect. The 761 became exceptional. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Bates, was a white officer who actually believed in his men. Bates was West Point class of 1936. He didn't have to take command of a black tank battalion. It was a career killer in an army where most white officers saw such assignments as punishment. But Bates volunteered for the position because he believed the army's racial policies were not just morally wrong, but tactically stupid. Under Bates, the 761st trained harder than most white tank battalions. They spent more hours on gunnery ranges. They ran more maintenance drills. They practiced coordination between tanks, infantry, and artillery until it was second nature. By mid-1943, the 761 was rated combat ready, and then they waited and waited. White tank battalions that activated after the 761st shipped out to Europe. Units with less training, lower qualification scores, worse discipline records, they all went to combat, while the 761st sat in Texas. The message was clear. The Army would rather fight short-handed than deploy black tankers to combat. By summer 1944, with the Allied invasion of France underway, the 761 had been combat-ready for over a year. They'd lost their edge from sitting idle. Morale was cratering. Some men requested transfers just to see action, even if it meant leaving the tanks they'd trained on for 2 years. And then, in October 1944, everything changed. General Patton was stuck. His Third Army had driven across France at breakneck speed after the Normandy breakout. But now, approaching the German border, his advance had stalled. The Germans had fortified the West Wall, the Siegfried Line, with concrete bunkers, minefields, and pre-registered artillery. Patton's tank battalions were exhausted, under strength, and bogged down in the mud of a French autumn. Patton needed fresh tank units. The Army had one available battalion in reserve, the 761st. Patton's staff advised against it. They warned that deploying black tankers would cause morale problems with white infantry units who would have to coordinate with them. They suggested waiting for white reinforcements. Patton's response was characteristically blunt. "I don't give a damn what color they are. I need tanks." On October 10th, 1944, the 761st Tank Battalion received deployment orders. After 2.5 years of training and waiting, they were finally going to war. They would enter combat on November 7th, 1944. They wouldn't leave combat until May 6th, 1945. 183 consecutive days later, November 7th, 1944, the Maginot Line fortifications near Moyenvic, France. The 761st's first combat mission is to support the 26th Infantry Division's assault on heavily fortified German positions. These aren't the retreating, demoralized Germans of the summer. These are experienced Wehrmacht troops defending prepared positions on their own frontier. The terrain is a nightmare. Autumn rains have turned the French countryside into a swamp. The M4 Sherman tanks, already underpowered compared to German Panzers, are struggling through mud that reaches halfway up their tracks. Visibility is limited. German artillery has pre-registered every approach route. Captain David Williams, commanding Company A, leads his tanks forward at dawn. Almost immediately, they come under fire. Here's what tank combat actually looks like. It's not the dramatic duels you see in movies. It's terrifying, claustrophobic, and often over in seconds. A German 88mm anti-tank gun can punch through a Sherman's armor from over a mile away. The first indication you're under fire is often the sound of the shell penetrating your tank, by which point it's too late. The Sherman crews called their tanks Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter, because they lit up so easily when hit. German tankers called them Tommy Cookers for the same reason. When a Sherman took a direct hit from German anti-tank weapons, the crew had about 10 seconds to evacuate before the ammunition stored inside the hull cooked off and turned the tank into a crematorium. Every man in a Sherman tank knew this. They climbed into their vehicles every morning knowing the odds were not in their favor. On that first day, the 761st lost 3 tanks, but they also destroyed multiple German bunkers, eliminated 2 German tank destroyers, and opened a corridor for infantry to advance through positions that had been holding for weeks. Lieutenant Colonel Bates wrote in his after-action report, "The battalion performed its mission with courage and determination. Enemy resistance was aggressive and well coordinated. Our losses were within expected parameters for initial combat operations. But between those formal lines, you can read the real story. The 761st had done what white tank battalions hadn't been able to do. They'd broken through. Word spread quickly through Patton's Third Army. The black tankers could fight. Over the next weeks, the 761st became Patton's go-to unit for impossible missions. When German positions needed to be cracked, when white units were exhausted, when a breakthrough was needed, Patton sent the Black Panthers. November 16th, the 761st supports the assault on Durs. Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers' tank destroys 2 German pillboxes and an 88mm gun position. His tank takes hits but remains operational. Rivers refuses medical evacuation for minor wounds. November 19th, the battalion fights through the town of Gwebling. Sergeant Johnny Holmes's tank crew knocks out a German Panther, a tank with twice the armor and firepower of their Sherman. Holmes later said the only reason they survived was that they spotted the Panther first and got off 3 rounds before the German crew could traverse their turret. All 3 rounds had to hit precisely the same spot to penetrate. They did. November 20th, the push toward Rohrbach. This is when Ruben Rivers becomes a legend. Rivers' tank is hit by German anti-tank fire. The shell doesn't penetrate, but it damages the track and wounds Rivers badly in the leg. His crew wants to evacuate. Rivers refuses. He field repairs the track under fire, climbs back into his tank, and continues the advance. His tank is hit again. This time the damage is worse. The tank is barely mobile. Medical personnel order Rivers to evacuate for treatment. Rivers refuses again. He continues fighting. For 3 days, Rivers leads his tank platoon forward despite his wounds. His leg is turning gangrenous. He can barely walk. His crew is begging him to accept medical evacuation. On November 19th, near the village of Gwebling, Rivers' tank encounters a German roadblock, 2 Panther tanks and multiple anti-tank guns in a prepared position. Rivers doesn't hesitate. He orders his tank forward to draw fire so the other Shermans in his platoon can flank the position. It's a suicide move and everyone knows it. Rivers' tank is hit immediately. The first shot penetrates the turret. The second hits the ammunition storage. The explosion is catastrophic. Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers is killed instantly, along with his entire crew. But his sacrifice allows the other tanks to destroy the German position. The advance continues. Rivers' company commander recommends him for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation is downgraded to a Silver Star. Then, inexplicably, even that is never awarded. For decades, Rivers' family doesn't even know he was recommended for any decoration beyond his Purple Heart. It will take 51 years before Ruben Rivers receives the Medal of Honor he earned in 1944. But in November 1944, there's no time to mourn. The 761st keeps fighting. By December 1st, they've been in continuous combat for 24 days. They've supported 6 different infantry divisions. They've destroyed or damaged over 100 German vehicles. They've suffered 24 killed in action and 81 wounded. They haven't had a single day out of combat, and they won't for another 5 months. December 16th, 1944. The 761st Tank Battalion has been in combat for 39 consecutive days. They're exhausted, under strength, and operating with tanks that desperately need maintenance. They're finally about to be rotated to the rear for a few days of rest. And then, at 5:30 a.m., the Germans launched the largest counter-offensive of the war on the Western Front, the Battle of the Bulge. Over 200,000 German troops, including the best remaining Panzer divisions, smash into the American lines in the Ardennes forest. The goal is to split the Allied armies, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace before the Soviets can reach Berlin. In the first 24 hours, the German offensive creates chaos. Entire American units are surrounded. Communication lines are cut. In some sectors, American forces are retreating in disarray. Patton's Third Army is 100 miles south of the breakthrough. His mission: wheel his entire army 90 degrees north and counterattack into the German flank. It's an operation that military historians consider one of the most impressive maneuvers of the war. Patton needs every tank battalion he has. The 761st's rest is cancelled. They're ordered north immediately. The weather is the coldest European winter in decades. Temperatures drop below 0 Fahrenheit. The tank's engines freeze overnight and have to be heated with blowtorches each morning. The crews are sleeping in their tanks because there's no time to set up proper billets. Frostbite casualties are almost as common as combat casualties. And the fighting is the most intense the 761st has faced. German Panzer units are different from the scattered resistance they fought in November. These are coordinated attacks by Panther and Tiger tanks, supported by veteran infantry and artillery. The Germans are fighting with the desperation of men who know this is their last chance. December 31st, 1944. The 761st is supporting the 87th Infantry Division near the town of Tillet, Belgium. It's one of the most vicious battles of the Bulge. Sergeant Warren Cressy is commanding a tank destroyer, an M10, basically a Sherman chassis with a more powerful gun but thinner armor and an open top turret. It's designed to ambush enemy tanks from concealed positions, not to engage in direct combat. Cressy's position comes under attack by German infantry and armor. He's outnumbered and outgunned. The logical move is to retreat. Cressy doesn't retreat. Over the next several hours, Sergeant Cressy and his crew will engage in one of the most remarkable individual actions of the war. Using his tank destroyer's superior gun, Cressy methodically destroys 6 German tanks, mix of Panthers and Mark IVs, multiple half-tracks and armored cars, several anti-tank gun positions, an unknown number of German infantry. He's doing this with an open-top turret, meaning he's exposed to German fire from above. His vehicle is hit multiple times, but remains operational. When his main gun runs low on ammunition, he switches to the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret. By the end of the day, Cressy has single-handedly held a critical position against a German counterattack. His company commander calls it the most aggressive and daring action I have witnessed in combat. Cressy is recommended for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation is downgraded to a Silver Star. The Silver Star is never actually awarded. Cressy receives nothing for 53 years. The pattern is becoming clear. Extraordinary valor by black soldiers is consistently downgraded or ignored. Recommendations for Medals of Honor become Silver Stars. Silver Stars become nothing. The 761st is performing at the highest level of any tank battalion in the European theater. But their achievements are being systematically minimized. But they keep fighting. January 1945. The 761st pushes through the Ardennes, helping to close the Bulge. They fight in conditions that are almost incomprehensible. The temperature stays below freezing for weeks. Supply lines are stretched thin. Ammunition and fuel are rationed. Hot food is a luxury they rarely see. Tank crews develop a routine. They sleep in their tanks to stay warm, though the metal interior is barely warmer than outside. They use ration tins filled with sand and gasoline as improvised heaters. Dangerous because the fumes can cause carbon monoxide poisoning in the enclosed space. They learn to recognize the sound of different German weapons by their report, because visibility in the fog and snow is often less than 50 yards. One member of the 761st, Horace Jones, later wrote, "People think war is this constant action. It's not. It's long periods of cold, hunger, and exhaustion, punctuated by moments of absolute terror when you're trying to kill someone before they kill you. And then you go back to being cold and hungry." By February 1945, the 761st has been in combat for 90 consecutive days. They've fought through France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. They've supported 12 different infantry divisions. They've destroyed or damaged over 400 German vehicles. They've suffered 71 killed in action and 236 wounded. They still haven't had a single day out of combat. And they're about to enter Germany itself. March 1945. The 761st Tank Battalion crosses the German border. For the black soldiers of the 761, there's a profound irony in this moment. They're invading Nazi Germany, a regime built explicitly on racial hierarchy and white supremacy, while serving in a segregated American army that practices its own version of racial exclusion. The Germans they're fighting believe in Aryan racial superiority. The American army they serve in doesn't let them eat at the same tables as white soldiers. One member of the 761st, Leonard Smitty Smith, later recalled, "We used to joke, darkly, about how we were fighting against racism with a racist army. But honestly, it wasn't that funny. It was infuriating. We knew we were good. We'd proven it over and over. And we knew we'd still go home to a segregated America when this was over. But there's no time for philosophical reflection. The advance into Germany is brutal. The Germans are fighting with the ferocity of men defending their homeland. Every town is fortified. Every bridge is demolished. Every road is mined. The Wehrmacht might be losing, but they're making the Allies pay for every mile. The 761st is assigned to the 71st Infantry Division, pushing toward the Austrian border. The terrain shifts from open French farmland to German forests and the beginnings of the Alps. Tank warfare in this environment is even more dangerous. Visibility is limited, ambush positions are everywhere, and the narrow roads make maneuver difficult. April 1945. The 761st reaches a series of towns in southern Germany. The names become a blur. Coburg, Bamberg, Bayreuth. Each one requires a coordinated assault. Each one costs casualties. But something else begins to happen. As they advance deeper into Germany, they start encountering concentration camps. The 761st isn't assigned to liberate camps. That's not their mission. But in April 1945, concentration camps are everywhere in southern Germany. You can't advance 30 miles without encountering one. The first one they encounter is a sub-camp of Flossenburg. It's not one of the major camps like Dachau or Buchenwald. It's a smaller facility used for slave labor in nearby factories. When the 761st's tanks roll up to the gates, what they find breaks something fundamental in even the most hardened veterans. Corpses stacked like firewood. Survivors who are more skeleton than human, weighing 70 or 80 pounds, unable to stand. The smell, a combination of death, disease, and human waste, is so overwhelming that tankers vomit inside their vehicles. E.G. McConnell, who fought through 5 months of combat without flinching, later said that the concentration camp was the only thing in the war that truly haunted him. You can process combat. You can understand killing enemy soldiers. But this was systematic evil. These weren't soldiers. They were civilians, men, women, children, murdered for existing. It changed how I saw the war. We weren't just fighting an enemy army. We were fighting something much darker. For the black soldiers of the 761, there's an additional dimension to the horror. They're seeing the end result of the racial ideology they've been fighting against, and they can't help but see parallels, however imperfect, to the racial terror black Americans faced at home. Lynchings, segregation, the systematic dehumanization of people based on their race. It wasn't the same as the Holocaust, but it came from a similar place, the belief that some humans are less human than others. The 761st doesn't have time to process this. They're still in combat. They push forward. May 2nd, 1945. The 761st reaches the town of Steyr, Austria. They've been fighting for 170 consecutive days. They're exhausted beyond description. Their tanks are held together with improvised repairs. They've lost over a third of their original strength to casualties. And then, on May 5th, they receive word. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. The 761st Tank Battalion's war ends on May 6, 1945, 183 consecutive days after it began. They fought through 6 countries: France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. They supported 12 different infantry divisions. They spearheaded assaults on over 30 towns and cities. They destroyed or damaged 461 enemy vehicles. They captured 81,000 enemy soldiers. They liberated several concentration camps. They lost 71 men killed in action, 236 wounded, and 44 missing or captured. By percentage, their casualties were among the highest of any American tank battalion in Europe. General Patton visited the battalion on May 8, 1945, VE Day. He stood before the survivors and said, "I'm proud of you. You've fought your way across Europe. You've proven yourselves to be among the finest soldiers I've ever commanded. The world will know what you've done." But that last part, "the world will know," wouldn't come true, not for a very long time. June 1945. The 761st Tank Battalion returns to the United States. There are no parades, no ticker tape celebrations, no front-page newspaper stories. They dock in New York Harbor, the same harbor where millions of white soldiers will be greeted as heroes over the coming months. But the 761st's return is quiet, almost secretive. They're processed through quickly and sent to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey for demobilization. Within weeks, they're discharged and scattered back to their hometowns across America. And then something remarkable happens. They're forgotten, not gradually, not over decades, almost immediately. The official military histories of World War II, published in the late 1940s and early 1950s, barely mention the 761st. When they do appear, it's usually a single line. The 761st Tank Battalion supported various operations in the European theater. No mention of 183 consecutive days in combat. No mention of their breakthrough at Moyenvik. No mention of their role in the Battle of the Bulge. No mention of concentration camp liberations. The Saturday Evening Post, Life magazine, Collier's, the major publications that documented the war for American audiences, don't write about the 761st. Hollywood makes dozens of World War II films in the 1940s and 1950s. None of them feature black tank crews. The 761st disappears from American memory. Why? Let's be direct about this. America in 1945 to 1950 is not ready to celebrate black military heroes. The dominant narrative of World War II is white soldiers, paratroopers, bomber crews, infantry, defeating evil. There's no place in that narrative for the story that would complicate it, that black soldiers performed with extraordinary valor while serving in a segregated, racist military. The military's own institutional racism plays a role. The 761st's after-action reports and commendations are filed, but they're not highlighted or celebrated. When white tank battalions are profiled in military journals, the 761st is excluded. And there's a more insidious dynamic: the medals. Remember Ruben Rivers, recommended for the Medal of Honor for his actions at Gebling in November 1944, downgraded to a Silver Star. The Silver Star is never awarded. His family doesn't even know he was recommended for a Medal of Honor. Warren G.H. Creasy, recommended for Medal of Honor for his single-handed defense during the Battle of the Bulge, downgraded to a Silver Star, never awarded. This pattern repeats across the 761st. Extraordinary acts of valor are systematically downgraded or ignored. And it's not unique to the 761st. It's happening across all black units in World War II. A 1993 study commissioned by the Army reviewed racial disparities in World War II medal recommendations. The findings were damning. Black soldiers were significantly less likely to receive high-level decorations for equivalent actions compared to white soldiers. The study found that not a single black soldier had received the Medal of Honor for service in Europe during World War II, despite hundreds of recommendations. The study concluded there is substantial evidence that African American soldiers were denied consideration for medals because of their race. The men of the 761 go home to a country that doesn't acknowledge what they did. Worse, they go home to a country that still treats them as second-class citizens. Leonard Smith returns to Mississippi. He can't find work as a mechanic. Jobs go to white veterans first. He eventually gets a job as a janitor. Horace Evans returns to Ohio. He applies for a home loan under the GI Bill. He's denied. The banks in his neighborhood don't offer mortgages to black veterans. Despite the federal law, he ends up renting for the next 20 years. E.G. McConnell goes to college on the GI Bill, one of the lucky ones, but he faces discrimination on campus. He's not allowed to join the Veterans Organization because it's whites only. These men fought for 183 consecutive days. They broke through German lines, they helped win World War II, and they come home to segregated buses, whites-only lunch counters, and systematic discrimination. The irony is crushing. They defeated Nazi racial ideology abroad. They couldn't defeat American racial ideology at home. But here's what the erasure couldn't erase. The men themselves remember. They stay in contact. They have reunions. They tell their children and grandchildren what they did. The official history might forget them, but they don't forget each other. And slowly, painfully slowly, the truth begins to emerge. In the 1970s, a few military historians begin investigating black units in World War II. They interview survivors. They dig through archives. They start piecing together the stories that were deliberately excluded from the official narratives. In 1978, the 761st Tank Battalion receives a Presidential Unit citation. 33 years after the war ends, it's the Army's highest unit-level decoration, recognizing extraordinary heroism. President Jimmy Carter presents it personally. But the individual medals, the medals of honor that Rivers, Cressy, and others earned, those take longer, much longer. January 13th, 1997, the White House. President Bill Clinton stands before a gathering that includes 7 elderly black men, survivors of the 761st Tank Battalion, now in their 70s and 80s. Clinton is about to present 7 medals of honor for World War II service. 4 will go posthumously to black soldiers who died in combat. 3 will go to living recipients. One of those living recipients is Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr., who didn't serve with the 761, but whose story parallels theirs. Extraordinary valor, systematically denied recognition for decades. For the 761st specifically, this ceremony represents partial justice. Ruben Rivers will finally receive his Medal of Honor 53 years after he died at Gebling. His sister, Grace Woodford, accepts it on his behalf. She's in her 80s now. She barely remembers her brother. He died when she was young, but she's carried the knowledge of his valor all her life. Warren G.H. Cressy isn't included in this ceremony. His Medal of Honor won't come until later reviews. This is what justice delayed looks like. A handful of men finally recognized decades after they earned recognition. Most of their comrades are already dead. The nation they served has changed dramatically. Segregation is illegal now. The civil rights movement has transformed America. But for the men of the 761st, recognition comes too late to enjoy, too late to change their lives. Leonard Smith, one of the 761st survivors, says at the ceremony, "We always knew what we did. We didn't fight for medals. We fought because it needed doing. But it would have been nice, it would have meant something, if our country had recognized it when it happened, when it could have made a difference in our lives." That's the cost of erasure. Not just historical injustice, but practical, life-changing injustice. If the 761st had been properly recognized in 1945, their members would have had access to opportunities denied to other black veterans. They would have been celebrated, honored, given preferential treatment in hiring and housing. Their children would have grown up knowing their fathers were heroes. Instead, they were ignored. And by the time recognition came, most of them were gone. Today, the 761st Tank Battalion is properly honored in military histories. They have monuments, memorials, museums. Their story is taught at West Point and the Armor School at Fort Benning. But here's the question we have to sit with. How many other stories like this exist? How many other units, other soldiers, other acts of extraordinary valor have been erased from history because they didn't fit the narrative America wanted to tell about itself? The 761st forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that excellence and heroism from marginalized groups are consistently undervalued, overlooked, or deliberately suppressed, and that when recognition finally comes, it's usually too late to matter to the people who earned it. The last surviving member of the 761st Tank Battalion died in 2019. The men who fought for 183 consecutive days, who broke through German lines, who helped win World War II, they're all gone now. What remains is the story. This story, the one that took 50 years to be told properly. Remember them, remember what they did, and remember why it took so long for America to acknowledge it.